When the loan officer quietly laid two original signatures beside each other, my entire life stopped making sense. If I had never borrowed $180,000, then who had? Why did every piece of identification belong to me? And why did the bank believe someone had been living under my financial identity for more than a year? Then he looked up and said, "Whoever did this knew things only family would know." At that moment, I realized the debt wasn't the worst part. The betrayal hiding behind it was. Before I tell you how I uncovered the truth, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your country and your local time in the comments. I always enjoy seeing how far these stories travel. And if stories about family truth and standing your ground speak to you, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and stayed with me for the rest of this one. By the time I walked out of Riverstone Community Bank that morning, the city looked exactly the same, but nothing in my life did. People hurried along Michigan Avenue with coffee cups in their hands. A bus rumbled past. Someone laughed outside a cafe. Chicago kept moving as if I hadn't just been told that I supposedly owed $180,000 I had never borrowed. I sat inside my car for nearly 20 minutes without starting the engine. Daniel Mercer had handed me copies of only a few pages from the loan file. He couldn't release everything yet because the fraud investigation had officially begun, but he wanted me to understand the seriousness of what we were dealing with. Every document carried my legal name, June Elizabeth Burns, my date of birth, my social security number, my previous home address, even my employment history. Whoever had submitted the application hadn't guessed those details. They knew them. I closed my eyes and tried to think logically. As a compliance analyst for a national logistics company, I spent my workdays investigating documentation, identifying irregularities, and recognizing patterns that most people overlooked. I had built my career on one simple habit: never let emotions replace evidence. Yet that morning, emotions were winning. Daniel's final question kept replaying in my mind. Has anyone in your family ever had access to your personal documents? At first I wanted to answer no. Then memory interrupted me. Years earlier, Emily, my younger sister, had borrowed documents from me more than once. Not because she wanted to steal anything, at least that's what I believed back then. Growing up, Emily and I couldn't have been more different. I liked routines. She loved risks. I planned. She improvised. Our parents often joked that I had been born 40 years old. Emily, meanwhile, always had another exciting idea, another business, another opportunity, another investor, another dream that was supposedly going to change her life. My mother, Susan Burns, adored that about her. "Your sister isn't afraid to dream," she'd say. Then she'd look at me. "And thank goodness you're responsible enough to catch her when she falls." People laughed every time, including me. Back then I thought it was harmless. Now I wasn't so sure. After college, I accepted a position in Chicago and spent years carefully building my credit. I paid every bill early, never missed a mortgage payment, never carried unnecessary debt. I drove the same reliable SUV for almost 10 years because it still worked perfectly. Financial stability wasn't exciting. It was freedom. Emily saw money differently. She believed debt was temporary if success was inevitable. She started an interior design company in her late 20s. For a while, it actually looked promising. She posted beautiful projects online. She attended networking events. She hired 2 employees. Our parents proudly shared every article that mentioned her business. Whenever relatives gathered, conversations always turned toward Emily's newest plans. June has a good job. Emily is building something extraordinary. That became the family narrative. I never resented her success. I even admired her confidence. When she called asking for help, I rarely questioned it. "Can I use your address for one piece of business mail mine is changing?" Sure. Could I borrow your passport scan? The conference registration system rejected mine. No problem. My landlord wants proof that I have a family emergency contact. Use mine. Each request seemed ordinary. Each favor seemed temporary. Each explanation sounded reasonable. Looking back now, what disturbed me wasn't any single favor. It was how naturally I had stopped asking why. 3 days after leaving the bank, Daniel called. We've completed an initial review of the account activity. What did you find? The loan wasn't funded in one payment. I frowned. What do you mean? There were 7 separate disbursements over approximately 14 months. That surprised me. I thought loans like that were issued all at once. Usually they are. This one was structured with scheduled releases tied to business expenses. So someone kept coming back. Exactly. And nobody questioned it. They had every required document. His answer made my stomach tighten. This wasn't a single desperate decision. Whoever had done this maintained the deception for over a year. Patiently, methodically. I asked the question I had been avoiding. Do you think this person planned everything from the beginning? Daniel was quiet for a moment. I think whoever submitted this application understood your financial history very well. After hanging up, I opened an old storage box in my apartment. Inside were folders I hadn't touched since moving across the city. Tax returns, insurance paperwork, employment records, copies of my passport renewal. Then something caught my attention. A large envelope labeled Personal Documents. I opened it. Several folders were missing. I stared into the empty space for a long moment. Had I removed them, or had someone else's memory came back slowly? Emily had borrowed that folder. Not permanently, just for one weekend. She had been preparing documents for an international design conference in Toronto. At least that's what she told me. She said the registration website needed examples of identification because one of her vendors was handling travel paperwork for several attendees. It'll save me so much time, she'd said. I'll return everything Monday. She did return a folder. I never checked whether every document inside was actually there. Because she was my sister. I called our mother that evening. She answered cheerfully. June, I was just thinking about you. Mom? Do you remember Emily borrowing some of my paperwork years ago? Silence. Then she laughed softly. Oh, honey, she borrowed things from everybody. What kind of things? Oh, copies of forms, addresses, contact information. Why, you know Emily. Her business was growing so fast. Something about her answer bothered me. It sounded rehearsed. I changed the subject before she could sense my suspicion. After we hung up, I wrote down everything I remembered. Dates, addresses, businesses, documents, phone numbers, patterns mattered. That habit had served me well for 13 years. Maybe it would save me now. The following afternoon, Daniel emailed me a preliminary timeline. One line immediately stood out. Primary contact email on loan application, jburnsbusiness.consult@gmail. I stared at it. That email address had never belonged to me. Not now, not ever. Which meant every payment notice, every approval, every verification, every warning, every official communication connected to the loan had been going somewhere else for over a year. And whoever controlled that inbox had known exactly what the bank was sending. I picked up my phone and called Daniel immediately. I've never seen this email before. I was hoping you'd say that. What do you mean? It gives our investigators another direction. I hesitated. What direction? His voice became unusually careful. We're going to find out who created that email. I barely slept that night. Not because I expected the email account to reveal everything overnight, but because it changed the shape of the entire situation. Until then, I had imagined someone stealing my identity once. Now I knew someone had maintained it. Whoever controlled that inbox had received every loan statement, every payment reminder, every account notification, and every message from the bank for more than a year. That wasn't a random act of fraud. It was an organized routine. The next morning, I arrived at Riverstone Community Bank carrying a legal pad filled with handwritten notes. Daniel Mercer was already waiting. "You came prepared. I investigate paperwork for a living," I said. "If I'm going to rebuild my life, I need every piece of this puzzle." He smiled slightly. "I had a feeling you'd say that." He led me into a conference room where another woman stood beside a stack of folders. "I'm Melissa Grant," she said, extending her hand, "senior fraud investigator." Unlike Daniel, Melissa wasn't trying to soften the conversation. She spoke with calm precision. "We're treating this as both a potential identity theft case and a possible internal process review." "What does that mean?" "It means we're investigating whoever used your identity." She paused. "And we're investigating whether anyone inside the lending process failed to follow required verification procedures." That surprised me. "So you think the bank made mistakes?" "I don't speculate." She slid a thick binder across the table. "I follow evidence." For the next 2 hours, we examined copies of nearly every document connected to the loan. Business registration forms, income projections, vendor invoices, insurance certificates, personal financial statements. At first glance, everything looked legitimate. Too legitimate. Every document fit neatly into the next. Every date supported another. Whoever assembled the file understood exactly what lenders expected to see. Melissa stopped at the signature pages. "Tell me what you notice." I leaned forward. Most people think signatures are about letters. They're not. They're about rhythm, pressure, habit, movement. My signature always ended with a slight upward curve beneath the final S in Burns. The forged signature copied the letters almost perfectly. Almost. The last curve dropped downward instead of rising, tiny, almost invisible. But once I saw it, I couldn't stop seeing it. I pointed to both pages. "The ending is wrong." Melissa nodded. "We noticed that too." She flipped to 3 more documents, then 2 more, then another. The same mistake appeared every time. Whoever practiced my signature had memorized its appearance, but not its muscle memory. I suddenly remembered something from years ago. Emily used to tease me about my signature whenever we split dinner bills. She'd laugh and say, "How do you even read that it looks like one giant wave?" I'd joke back, "That's the point." She had seen me sign my name hundreds of times, maybe thousands. The thought made my chest tighten. Melissa interrupted my silence. "Anything come to mind?" "Maybe. Tell me." "I keep thinking about someone who watched me sign documents for years." She didn't ask who. She simply wrote another note. After another hour, Melissa closed one folder. "Unfortunately, we have one problem." "What?" "The security footage." I already knew where this was going. "It's gone." She nodded. "Our retention policy at that time was 12 months. This loan was approved 18 months ago. So the recordings no longer exist." For a moment, I felt the investigation slipping away. Without video, it would become my word against someone else's. Melissa seemed to read my expression. "Don't assume evidence disappears just because cameras do." "What do you mean?" "People leave traces in other ways." She opened another file. "This is the in-person verification record. A single page, initials, employee identification number, date, time, notes. The handwriting belonged to the loan officer who had completed the identity verification. Richard Hale, retired 6 months earlier. Melissa looked at me. He no longer works here. So that's it. Actually, she smiled for the first time all morning. Richard had an unusual habit. What kind of habit? He kept personal notebooks. I frowned. Personal notebooks. He wrote reminders after almost every complicated client meeting. Is that allowed? They weren't official bank records. They were simply memory aids. Melissa continued. When we contacted him yesterday, he remembered this loan immediately. My pulse quickened. He remembered it. He said it stood out. Why, he wouldn't explain over the phone. Can I speak with him? He agreed to meet you. I stared at her. When? Tomorrow afternoon. As I left the bank, my phone vibrated. Emily. I hadn't spoken to her since calling Mom. I almost ignored it. Instead, I answered, Hey. Her voice sounded unusually cheerful. I was thinking about you. Really? Mom said you sounded stressed. I've had a busy week. You know, she said carefully, sometimes life throws paperwork at us that isn't worth fighting. My grip tightened around the steering wheel. What paperwork? She laughed softly. Oh, I don't know. Insurance. Taxes. Credit mistakes. Things happen. There it was. She didn't know what I knew, but somehow she knew paperwork had become part of my life. I chose every word carefully. What makes you think I'm dealing with paperwork? A brief silence. Then, I was just guessing. She changed the subject almost immediately. So, are you coming to Mom and Dad's barbecue this weekend? I haven't decided. It would really mean a lot. I'll let you know. After we hung up, I replayed the conversation in my head. Emily had always talked quickly. Normally, she jumped from topic to topic without thinking. Today, every sentence felt measured, as if she were checking how much I knew. That evening, I opened my laptop and searched through years of archived family photos, birthdays, Christmas dinners, graduations, vacations. At first, I wasn't looking for evidence. I was looking for memories. Then one picture caught my attention. It had been taken during Emily's first year running her design business. She was sitting at my dining room table surrounded by folders. My folders. I zoomed in. The image wasn't clear enough to read any documents, but I could identify the blue accordion file, the same one that had held my passport copy tax records, employment verification letters, and old mortgage paperwork. I checked the photo's timestamp. 8 years earlier. Long before the loan. Long before I imagined those documents could matter. I emailed the picture to Melissa anyway. Her reply came only 15 minutes later. Interesting. Please preserve the original file with metadata. That response surprised me. Why would an ordinary family photograph matter? The following afternoon, I drove across town to meet Richard Hale. His house sat on a quiet street lined with maple trees. When he opened the front door, he smiled politely. You must be June Burns. I am. I've been expecting you. He invited me inside. Books covered nearly every wall. On the coffee table rested a worn black notebook. Richard noticed me looking at it. I think this is what you came to see. He placed the notebook between us. Then he took a slow breath before speaking. I don't remember every customer. He gently rested one hand on the cover. But I remember the woman who claimed to be you. Richard Hale didn't open the notebook immediately. Instead, he studied my face for several quiet seconds. I've learned something over the years, he said. People remember facts differently after they've been hurt. So before I show you anything, tell me why you're here. It wasn't a test. It was an invitation. I explained everything from the beginning: the phone call from Riverstone Community Bank, the 2 original signatures, the mysterious email address, the missing documents, the loan, the 7 separate disbursements, the conversations with Daniel Mercer and Melissa Grant. I didn't mention Emily until the very end. I don't have proof it was my sister. Richard nodded slowly. Good. I blinked. Good. You didn't walk in here asking me to confirm your suspicion. He leaned back in his chair. You came looking for the truth. Then he finally opened the notebook. Every page was dated. Each customer occupied only a few lines, small reminders, nothing confidential, just details he wanted to remember if a complicated file ever resurfaced. He flipped carefully until he stopped on a page marked 18 months earlier. There. I looked down. The first line listed the appointment time. The second line listed the business loan application. The third line simply read, applicant unusually confident. Richard tapped the page. That caught my attention because most first-time borrowers asking for this amount are nervous. I kept reading. Discussed commercial renovation. Mentioned expanding design business. Strong sales presentation. Requested accelerated funding schedule. I frowned. I've never owned a design business. I know. He turned another page. I remembered that later. What do you mean? A few months after this meeting, another customer mentioned your company. My company? I assumed she meant the design business. He smiled apologetically. I didn't realize I'd mixed 2 different people together. My heartbeat slowed. So the woman who came here talked about running a design company? Repeatedly. Emily. Every project she had ever talked about, every showroom, every renovation, every custom furniture order. She hadn't even pretended to be me professionally. She had described her own life. Richard continued reading. Accompanied by older female, introduced as applicant's mother, very supportive, asked several questions regarding repayment flexibility. I felt my stomach tighten. My mother. I can only tell you what I wrote. Did she identify herself? She introduced herself as Susan. He looked directly at me. I don't know whether that was true. Neither of us spoke for several seconds. Richard broke the silence. You look like someone who's trying very hard not to jump to conclusions. I am. Keep doing that. He closed the notebook halfway. Because there's something else. I straightened in my chair. The woman sitting across from me that day wasn't acting like someone committing fraud. What do you mean? She wasn't nervous. Not even a little. She answered every verification question immediately. She knew birthdays, previous addresses, employment dates, the spelling of names, everything. He paused. I remember thinking this family must be unusually close. That sentence hurt more than I expected, because once upon a time, we had been. Emily and I used to finish each other's sentences. When she started her business, I helped organize her accounting software. I proofread contracts, reviewed invoices, helped her understand taxes. She called me every week. She trusted me with everything. Apparently, I had trusted her with even more. Richard carefully slid the notebook toward me. I made one final note. I looked down. Customer appeared familiar with banking procedures. Mother did most listening. Daughter did most talking. Possible repeat borrower. What does that last line mean? Richard folded his hands. I wasn't certain. But she handled the meeting like someone who had borrowed money before. Experienced. Comfortable. Confident. Emily had never told our family she'd taken large business loans before. She always claimed investors were funding her company. That detail settled heavily in my mind. Richard reached into a drawer beside his chair. I almost forgot. He removed a folded business card. I found this tucked inside the notebook. On the back was the handwritten note. Client requested faster processing. Follow up with broker. There was also a name. Thomas Keegan. Loan broker. I recognized neither. Richard noticed. You've never heard of him? No. He wasn't employed by the bank. He referred commercial borrowers. So he brought clients here. Sometimes. I took a picture of the card. This could help Melissa. I believe it will. Before I left, Richard stopped me at the front door. June. Yes. I've replayed that meeting several times since Melissa called. You have... I kept asking myself how I failed to recognize the wrong person. You didn't know me. No. But I did verify identity. He sighed quietly. The woman handed me perfectly matching documents. Government identification. Supporting records. Everything. He looked genuinely troubled. If any document had appeared suspicious, I would have stopped the process immediately. I believe you. He gave me a grateful nod. Thank you. On my drive home, I called Melissa. She answered before the second ring. Did you meet Richard? I did. And I summarized everything. The design business, the mother, the notebook. Thomas Keegan. There was a long silence. Finally, Melissa spoke. June. What? We've been looking into that broker. You found something. Enough to concern us. What kind of concern? We've identified several commercial loans he referred during roughly the same period. And some contain unusual documentation issues. I gripped the steering wheel tighter, meaning they're under review. So this isn't just about me. We don't know yet. That answer changed everything. Until then, I believed someone had stolen my identity. Now another possibility appeared. What if someone had learned how to exploit weaknesses in the lending process? And what if Emily wasn't the only borrower connected to that broker? Melissa interrupted my thoughts. I need you to do one more thing. Anything. Don't confront your family yet. I wasn't planning to. I'm serious. Her tone sharpened. If someone else is involved, we don't want anyone coordinating stories. I understand. I'll call you tomorrow. That evening, I drove to my parents' neighborhood without telling anyone. I didn't intend to knock on the door. I simply wanted to think. Their house looked exactly as it always had. Fresh flowers by the porch, Dad's truck in the driveway, the porch light glowing before sunset because Mom always turned it on early. As I sat across the street, another vehicle pulled into the driveway. A dark gray sedan. A man stepped out carrying a leather portfolio. He walked confidently to the front door. Emily answered almost immediately. She seemed to be expecting him. The man handed her several documents. She signed something on the hood of his car. Then he left less than 5 minutes later. I couldn't see his face clearly, but when the sedan drove past my parked SUV, I caught the license plate just long enough to memorize the last 4 digits. I wrote them on the same legal pad I'd been carrying since the bank called. When I got home, my phone buzzed. Melissa. I was just about to call you. So was I, she said. I need to ask you something. What is it? Did your sister ever work with someone named Thomas Keegan? I looked down at the license plate I had just written. Then I answered slowly. I don't know. I paused. But I think I may have just seen someone delivering paperwork to her house. Melissa didn't answer immediately. June, where are you right now? At my apartment. Good. Her voice became noticeably calmer. Tell me exactly what you saw. I looked at the notes I'd scribbled while sitting across from my parents' house. Dark gray sedan. Business clothes. Leather portfolio. My sister came outside before he even knocked. He handed her documents. She signed something. He left within 5 minutes. Did you recognize him? No. Could you see the paperwork? Not clearly. License plate. I wrote down the last 4 numbers. She asked me to read them. I did. Keys clicked rapidly on her keyboard, then silence. Another 10 seconds passed. Finally, she spoke. That vehicle isn't registered to Thomas Keegan. My shoulders relaxed for a moment. Then she added, it belongs to another lending consultant. My stomach tightened again. Another one. Yes. Someone who has worked with Keegan before. That wasn't proof of anything, but it certainly wasn't comforting. Melissa asked me to email my notes immediately. Before ending the call, she repeated something she had already told me twice. Please don't confront your family. I won't. I mean it. I know. We're getting close to understanding how this happened. Close. That word stayed with me all night. Saturday afternoon, my parents hosted their annual backyard barbecue. Every summer, they invited relatives, neighbors, church friends, and anyone else who happened to be available. Normally, I enjoyed those afternoons. This time, I almost stayed home. Then I realized something. If everyone believed nothing had happened, people would behave naturally. Sometimes the best way to learn the truth was simply to observe. I arrived carrying the potato salad my mother had asked me to bring 3 days earlier. Susan greeted me with her usual smile. There you are. She hugged me tightly. You look tired. Busy week. I told everyone you've been buried at work. Of course she had. Keeping up appearances had always mattered to my mother. She believed problems should be solved quietly, preferably before anyone outside the family noticed. Dad stood beside the grill wearing his favorite baseball cap. Hey, kiddo. He hugged me too. Everything felt normal, almost painfully normal. Emily arrived 20 minutes later. She walked in laughing with 2 friends from her design company. If she was worried about the bank investigation, she hid it well. She hugged me. I've missed you. Have you? She pulled back slightly. What does that mean? Nothing. She searched my face. For one brief second, I saw uncertainty. Then it disappeared behind another practiced smile. The afternoon unfolded exactly as family gatherings always did. Children ran through sprinklers. My uncle argued about baseball. My aunt insisted everyone take leftovers home. Emily entertained people with stories about design projects. Mom floated from table to table, making sure every guest had enough food. Anyone watching would have called us a close family. Only I knew how fragile that picture had become. Around sunset, Emily sat beside me on the patio. You've been quiet. I've been thinking. About what? I looked at her. Our family. She laughed softly. We're not that interesting. No. She took a sip of iced tea. We've always looked out for each other. That sentence lingered between us. Looked out for each other. Had we? Or had I simply looked out for everyone else? Emily broke the silence. Mom mentioned you've been sorting through old paperwork. I turned slowly. I didn't tell Mom that. She froze. For less than a second. But I noticed. I assumed. Why? You've always been organized. No. I smiled politely. Why did Mom say that? Emily looked away toward the backyard. I guess she misunderstood something. Maybe. Or maybe my mother had told Emily more than she admitted. I changed the subject. How's business? Emily hesitated. It's getting better? What projects are you working on? Oh, you know. Residential. Commercial. A little of everything. Her answers surprised me. Emily normally loved discussing work. Today she avoided details. Then my father joined us. Your sister's finally turning things around. Emily quickly nodded. Dad? It's true. He looked proud. You've worked hard. I watched them carefully. Something felt rehearsed. almost as if they'd had this conversation before. Later that evening, while everyone gathered for dessert, I wandered into the kitchen to refill a pitcher of lemonade. Mom followed me inside. She closed the screen door behind her. "We need to talk." Her voice was low enough that no one outside could hear. "About what?" She folded a kitchen towel slowly. "I know something is bothering you." "I'm handling it. You've always handled everything." There it was again, the compliment that had followed me my entire life. The responsible daughter, the dependable daughter, the daughter who could carry more because she always had. Mom reached for my hand. "Whatever this is," she squeezed gently, "don't let it destroy your relationship with your sister." I stared at her. "You don't even know what this is." She smiled sadly. "I know families." "No," I said quietly. "You know our family." The smile faded. "There's a difference." She looked genuinely confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean we spend a lot of time protecting each other." "Isn't that what families do?" "Not if protecting someone means lying to someone else." For the first time all afternoon, my mother looked frightened. She released my hand. "I don't understand." I held her gaze. "I hope that's true." Before she could answer, guests walked into the kitchen looking for dessert plates. The conversation ended, but her expression stayed with me. She wasn't surprised. She was afraid. Those weren't the same thing. The following Monday morning, Melissa called before I reached my office. "We've completed another review." "What did you find?" "Financial records." "What kind?" "The loan disbursements." I parked without turning off the engine. "Tell me." "The money wasn't sent directly to one business account." "It wasn't—" "No. It moved through multiple accounts." "Can you identify them?" "Some." She hesitated. "One account belongs to your sister's company." That didn't shock me anymore. "What about the others?" "Two are vendors." "One appears to be a consulting firm." "And the last?" Silence. "Melissa." "The last transfers concern us." "Why?" "They went to a personal checking account." "Whose—" "We subpoenaed the records." "And—" "The account owners are David and Susan Burns." I closed my eyes. For several seconds I couldn't speak. My parents. Not a company, not a trust, not a business expense. My parents' personal bank account. When I finally found my voice, it barely sounded like mine. "How much?" Melissa answered quietly. "Just over $34,000. I stared through the windshield. Every birthday gift, every holiday dinner, every conversation about family loyalty, every lecture about forgiveness, every reminder that blood mattered more than money. Suddenly, they all sounded different. "Do you know why the money was sent there?" I asked. "Not yet." "Could it have been repayment?" "It's possible." "A loan?" "Possible." "A gift?" "Possible." She paused. "But one thing is certain." "What?" "The transfers happened within days of each loan disbursement." That wasn't proof of a crime, but it was enough to destroy the last comfortable explanation I'd been holding on to. Maybe my parents hadn't known every detail. Maybe they hadn't planned the fraud. But they had accepted money that existed only because someone had borrowed $180,000 in my name. And if they knew where that money came from, everything was about to change. I spent the rest of that Monday pretending to work. My computer screen displayed spreadsheets. Emails continued arriving. Meetings came and went. I answered questions, reviewed compliance reports, and approved routine documentation exactly as I always did. No one in my office suspected that I had just learned my parents' bank account had received more than $34,000 connected to a fraudulent loan taken out in my name. Normally, when I investigated corporate misconduct, I told junior analysts to avoid making conclusions before collecting enough evidence. I repeated that advice to myself all afternoon. $34,000 wasn't proof that my parents had participated in fraud. Money moved for many reasons: repayments, investments, loans between family members, business reimbursements. The transfers explained nothing by themselves, but they destroyed one possibility. My parents could no longer honestly say they had nothing to do with Emily's finances. When I got home, Jennifer Cole was waiting for my call. Melissa had recommended her after deciding the case had grown beyond a routine identity theft investigation. Jennifer specialized in financial fraud and document authentication. Unlike television lawyers, she didn't speak dramatically. She listened far more than she talked. For nearly an hour, I walked her through everything. She interrupted only to clarify dates or names. When I finished, she closed her notebook. "June, I'm going to ask you something that may sound strange." "Go ahead. Have you confronted your sister?" "No." "Your parents?" "Not since learning about the bank transfers." "Good." Her answer surprised me. "I thought you'd want me to demand explanations." Jennifer shook her head. "People explain. Documents reveal." That sentence sounded simple, but it changed the direction of my thinking. She continued, "If someone lies to your face today, you'll never know whether they're protecting themselves or telling the truth. So what do? We let evidence answer first." Jennifer outlined the legal process in plain English. "The bank is already investigating potential fraud." "Yes. Separately, you're the victim of identity misuse." "I understand. Those are related issues, but they're not identical." She drew 2 circles on her legal pad. "One investigation asks who obtained the money. The other asks who falsely represented themselves as you. The answer may be the same person. It may not." I appreciated her precision. Nothing was exaggerated. Nothing was simplified. "What's our priority?" I asked. "Your priority is restoring your legal and financial identity." "Not punishing Emily." Jennifer folded her hands. "If criminal responsibility exists, the appropriate authorities will determine that." She looked directly at me. "My responsibility is protecting you." No one in my family had said anything like that in years. Protecting me, not asking me to sacrifice, not asking me to understand, not asking me to forgive before learning the truth, simply protecting me. Jennifer slid another sheet of paper toward me. "I want you to think carefully." "About what?" "Every time you've ever shared personal identification." I frowned. "I've already told Melissa about Emily borrowing my documents." "Think smaller." "Smaller?" "Emails, photographs, scanned copies, employment letters, passport images, anything." I promised to search everything again. That evening, my apartment looked like an archive room. Old laptops sat charging on the dining table. External hard drives lined the counter. 3 cardboard boxes filled with tax files covered my living room floor. If evidence existed, I intended to find it. Around 10 o'clock, I opened an email account I hadn't used in years. Thousands of unread messages appeared. Store promotions, travel confirmations, newsletters. Then I searched one word: Emily. More than 200 emails appeared. Most were ordinary: family plans, birthday dinners, Christmas shopping. Then one subject line caught my eye: "Need your passport scan ASAP, the date, 8 years earlier." Exactly as I remembered. I opened it. "Hey June, the conference organizer changed their requirements again. They need a passport copy today so they can process international vendor registrations. Mine is already uploaded, but they're asking for emergency contact verification too. Can you send me yours? It'll save me hours. I owe you dinner. Love you. Emily. I smiled sadly. That email sounded exactly like my sister. Warm, casual, trustworthy. I scrolled down. There was my reply. Sure. Attached. Good luck this weekend. The attachment was no longer stored in the email server. But another message appeared immediately afterward. Emily had replied only 3 minutes later. You're seriously the best sister. Thank you, nothing suspicious. Nothing alarming. If someone had shown me those emails 8 years ago, I would have laughed at the idea they could someday become evidence. I forwarded the exchange to Jennifer. Less than 15 minutes later, she called. You found something important. The passport email? Yes. I already told you about it. You told me about your memory. She paused. This is different. How? Now we have a documented request. I understood immediately. Memories could be challenged. Emails had timestamps. Jennifer continued. The timing matters. Why? Because the loan file contains a passport scan. I closed my eyes. The same one. Exactly. It even includes the same tiny crease in the upper right corner. What does that mean? It wasn't rescanned. It was reused. The realization hit me harder than I expected. Emily hadn't randomly found my identification years later. She had preserved the exact digital file I willingly sent her for 8 years. Jennifer let the silence settle. Finally, she asked, June, has anyone else ever requested that passport scan? No. Anyone? No. She wrote something down. That's helpful. The following morning, Jennifer accompanied me to Riverstone Community Bank. Melissa and Daniel were already waiting in the conference room. Melissa projected several documents onto a large screen. The forensic document examiner completed a preliminary comparison. I felt my heartbeat quicken. Already, they prioritized the case. She enlarged the passport image, then the loan application, then my old employment verification letter. The examiner had marked tiny imperfections invisible to the naked eye. Dust particles, scanner streaks, compression artifacts. Each image contained identical digital fingerprints. Melissa pointed to one corner. This copy originated from the same scanned file. She changed slides. Not from the original passport. Jennifer nodded slowly. So, whoever submitted the application didn't simply possess June's passport. Melissa answered. They possessed the exact digital copy she emailed years earlier. The room became very quiet. Daniel looked toward me. I know this is difficult. I barely heard him. Because another realization had just formed. If Emily had kept that file for 8 years, then this wasn't a desperate decision made during a financial emergency. It meant she had kept my identity available all that time, like something she believed she might need someday. Melissa interrupted my thoughts. We're still waiting for the handwriting analysis. Jennifer looked at her. Any estimate? Melissa glanced at the latest notification on her laptop. As a matter of fact, she stopped reading. Her expression changed. What is it? I asked. She slowly turned the screen toward us. The examiner wants every original signature June has ever provided to Riverstone. I frowned. Every signature, Melissa nodded. He believes one document inside the loan file wasn't forged. For a few seconds, nobody in the conference room spoke. I looked from Melissa to Jennifer, then to Daniel. I don't understand, I finally said. If one signature is real, how is that possible? Melissa turned the laptop so all of us could see the examiner's notes. The report is preliminary, but the examiner is confident enough to request additional comparison samples. Jennifer leaned forward. What exactly caught his attention? Melissa highlighted one paragraph. The pressure pattern on 6 signatures is inconsistent with Ms. Burns's known writing characteristics. She scrolled lower. However, there it was. One signature displays natural pen pressure, continuous stroke rhythm, and genuine hesitation points, consistent with authentic execution. Daniel looked confused. So one signature belongs to June. Melissa nodded. That's what the examiner believes. I stared at the screen. But I never signed anything related to this loan, Jennifer answered before Melissa could. Then the signature may have originated somewhere else. I frowned, meaning it could have been copied from another document. I shook my head. You can't just move a signature from one contract to another. Jennifer gave me a patient look. You'd be surprised what people attempt. Melissa added, especially several years ago before some institutions strengthened document authentication. She opened another folder. We've requested every document Riverstone has on file containing your original signature. I searched my memory. I've never borrowed money here. No, Daniel nodded. But you've done business with us before. I blinked, then remembered. My first mortgage. Exactly. 8 years earlier, shortly after buying my condo, I had financed it through Riverstone. I had signed dozens of documents, loan disclosures, insurance acknowledgments, escrow agreements, tax forms. Every page had required my signature. Melissa looked at me. Do you still have your closing package? I think so. Jennifer smiled. Good. We'll need it. That afternoon, I returned home and climbed into the storage closet. After almost an hour of opening old boxes, I found the blue binder from my condo purchase. Everything was still there, exactly as I'd organized it years ago: tabs, dividers, receipts, closing disclosures. I carried the entire binder to Jennifer's office. She and Melissa spent nearly 40 minutes comparing signatures page by page. Eventually, Melissa stopped. There, she pointed to a routine authorization form buried near the end of the mortgage paperwork. The signature looked identical. Not similar, identical. Jennifer placed the mortgage document beside one page from the fraudulent loan file. Even before Melissa overlaid transparent comparison sheets, I knew. Every curve, every tiny dot of ink, every microscopic break in the line. Perfectly identical, not naturally identical, mechanically identical. Jennifer spoke quietly. No human signs their name exactly the same way twice. Melissa nodded. These are the same image. Daniel looked stunned. So someone, Jennifer finished his sentence, lifted June's genuine signature from an unrelated mortgage document. Melissa carefully slid the papers back into protective sleeves, which means the person didn't successfully forge this page. They reused an authentic signature. I leaned back in my chair. A strange feeling washed over me. Relief, anger, disbelief. For days I had wondered whether someone had become skilled enough to imitate my handwriting perfectly. Now I knew the truth. They hadn't. They had simply stolen something that already belonged to me. Jennifer looked at me. June, this changes the case. How? The examiner can now distinguish between the forged signatures and the transplanted genuine signature. Melissa nodded. It also tells us whoever assembled this file had access to historical documents, not just my passport, not just my employment history, even mortgage paperwork. That binder had never left my apartment, except once. I suddenly remembered. 6 years earlier, when refinancing had briefly crossed my mind, Emily had asked whether she could see my mortgage documents. She wanted to understand commercial lending because she hoped to buy a warehouse for her business someday. I remembered sitting beside her at my dining room table. She flipped through every page, asked questions, took notes. At one point, she borrowed the binder overnight, She returned it the following afternoon. I never counted the pages. Because why would I? I quietly told Jennifer everything. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she asked only one question. Did Emily ever have unsupervised access to the binder? Yes. For how long? One night. She nodded slowly. That's enough. 2 days later, Melissa called another meeting. This time the atmosphere felt different, more serious, less uncertain. She closed the conference room door before speaking. We've completed the handwriting examination. She handed each of us a copy of the report. The conclusion appeared near the bottom. The questioned signatures and the known signatures were not produced by the same writer. I read the sentence twice, then a third time. Melissa continued. The examiner identified multiple differences in pen pressure stroke sequence, connecting movements, baseline alignment, and natural variation. Daniel smiled for the first time since I'd met him. So we can officially eliminate June as the signer, Melissa nodded. Yes. Relief flooded through me. Not because I had ever doubted my innocence, but because now I no longer had to convince anyone else. Jennifer flipped another page. There's an appendix. Melissa nodded again. The examiner also confirmed one signature was digitally reproduced from an earlier mortgage document. Jennifer looked impressed. That's unusually clear. It is. Melissa folded her hands, which means we now have evidence of 2 different methods. She counted on her fingers. 1, someone repeatedly forged June's signature. 2, someone inserted one authentic signature from an unrelated document. The combination made the file appear more credible. Daniel looked toward me. That wasn't an amateur. No, Melissa agreed. It required planning. I expected to feel triumphant. Instead, I felt tired. Very tired. Because every answer created another question. If Emily had done this, who taught her, who knew enough about lending files to assemble everything? Why had no one questioned the mixture of genuine and forged signatures? Melissa seemed to anticipate those thoughts. We're expanding our internal review. What does that involve? I asked. We're examining every communication connected to the application. Emails, yes. Phone logs. Internal notes. Broker correspondence. She hesitated. And employee messaging. Jennifer looked up immediately. You think someone inside the process helped? Melissa chose her words carefully. I think someone ignored warning signs. Daniel sighed quietly. That's not the same thing. No, Melissa agreed. But it's still important. She opened one final folder. This morning we interviewed Thomas Keegan. I leaned forward. What did he say? He denied everything. Of course. He claims he believed the borrower was you. Jennifer asked, Did he identify the person he met? Melissa nodded. He described a woman in her early 30s. My heartbeat quickened. Did he identify her? He said he doesn't remember her name. I almost laughed. Convenient. Melissa wasn't finished. But she slid one sheet across the table. We recovered his appointment calendar. Several names had been blacked out for privacy. One line remained visible. Consultation, E. Burns Design. The meeting date was exactly 3 weeks before the fraudulent loan application had been submitted. I stared at the words. E. Burns Design. Emily's company. Melissa spoke softly. We still need additional corroboration. Jennifer nodded, but this establishes contact. It does. Before anyone could say another word, Melissa's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen, then looked directly at me. The internal audit team just found something. What? She slowly closed the file. A bank employee accessed your old mortgage records less than 24 hours before the business loan application was approved. The room fell completely silent. I looked at Melissa, waiting for her to say she'd misread the message. She didn't. A bank employee accessed my mortgage file, I asked. Yes. Isn't that normal? It depends. Melissa turned her laptop toward Jennifer and me. Employees access archived records every day. The system logs every search. She pointed to one line. What's unusual is that this employee wasn't assigned to your old mortgage. She clicked again. And they weren't assigned to the new commercial loan either. Jennifer's eyebrows lifted. So there was no business reason to open June's file? None that we've identified. Daniel leaned forward. Who was it? Melissa shook her head. I can't disclose the name yet. Why not? Because internal audit is conducting interviews before making formal findings. I could hear the frustration in Daniel's voice. So we know someone opened June's mortgage file one day before the fraudulent loan closed. Correct. And we know one authentic signature came from those mortgage documents. Correct. But we don't yet know whether that employee knowingly assisted anyone. Melissa nodded. Exactly. Jennifer folded her arms. That's the right approach. I appreciated that. She wasn't looking for someone to blame. She was looking for facts. 3 days later, Melissa called again. This isn't an emergency, she said, but I'd like you to come in. When I arrived, she looked exhausted. Coffee cups covered one corner of her desk. Stacks of interview summaries filled another. We've made progress. She handed me a printed timeline. Every important event from the past 18 months appeared in chronological order. Consultation with Thomas Keegan, business loan application, identity verification, mortgage archive accessed, approval, 7 separate disbursements, transfers into Emily's company, transfers into my parents' account. Looking at everything together was different from hearing each piece separately. For the first time, I could see the entire sequence. Nothing happened by accident. Every step depended on the previous one. Melissa tapped one date. This changed everything. The mortgage archive access. What did you learn? The employee admitted opening your file. I felt my pulse quicken. They confessed. They admitted accessing it. Why? They said Thomas Keegan called asking whether your previous mortgage signatures were still available in archived records. Jennifer looked up immediately. He asked directly. Melissa nodded. The employee believed Keegan was verifying identity for another transaction. So they opened the archive. Yes. Did they email him anything? No. Print anything? No. What happened? Melissa took a slow breath. They viewed the documents on screen. That's all. So they claim. Jennifer was quiet for several moments. Then she asked, was the employee trained never to provide access without authorization? Yes. So even viewing the records violated policy? Melissa nodded. It did. The employee wasn't being accused of participating in fraud, but they had ignored bank procedures. That single decision had opened a door that should have remained closed. A week later, mediation was scheduled between the bank, my legal counsel, and representatives connected to the investigation. Emily attended with her attorney. It was the first time we had seen each other since the barbecue. She looked different, not dramatic, just smaller. The confidence that had always filled every room seemed to have disappeared. When she looked at me, she didn't smile. She simply whispered, "Hi." I nodded politely. Neither of us tried to hug. Neither of us pretended everything was normal. The mediator explained the purpose of the meeting. This is not a criminal proceeding. We're here to discuss the civil issues, financial responsibility, and possible resolution. For nearly 2 hours, attorneys discussed documents I had already memorized. Loan agreements, transfer records, authentication reports, bank policies, audit findings. Finally, Emily's attorney requested a private break. When everyone returned, Emily asked whether she could speak. No one objected. She kept her eyes on the conference table. I never wanted this to happen. Jennifer didn't interrupt. Neither did I. Emily continued. When my business started failing, I thought I could save it. Her voice shook. I believed if I kept the company alive for another year, I'd repay everything before June ever knew. I listened. Not because I accepted the explanation, because I wanted to hear it completely. I kept telling myself it was temporary. She looked up for the first time. It stopped feeling temporary when I couldn't catch up anymore. The room remained quiet. Then Jennifer asked one careful question. Emily, who suggested using June's identity? Emily hesitated, long enough that everyone noticed. Finally, she answered, No one forced me. That wasn't my question. Emily closed her eyes. Thomas told me lenders trusted applicants with excellent credit. Jennifer waited. He asked whether anyone in my family had strong financial records. And I said my sister did. My chest tightened. Emily continued speaking almost mechanically. He never told me to steal anything. He just... She stopped. What? He kept saying there were ways to make applications stronger. Melissa wrote something in her notebook. Jennifer asked another question. Did Thomas ever possess June's passport copy? No. Her mortgage papers. Emily looked genuinely surprised. No? Then where did those documents come from? Emily stared at me. For the first time since the investigation began, she looked completely confused. I thought... She swallowed. I thought the bank already had those. Nobody spoke. Even Jennifer looked surprised. Emily slowly shook her head. I never gave anyone June's mortgage documents. Melissa looked toward Jennifer. Jennifer looked toward me. The room had just shifted again. Because if Emily was telling the truth, then someone else had supplied the authentic mortgage signature. Melissa quietly closed her notebook. I think we're finished for today. As everyone stood, Jennifer lightly touched my arm. Outside the conference room, she spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. I believe Emily is still responsible for using your identity. I nodded. So do I. But... She looked back through the glass wall at the empty conference room. I no longer believe she acted with every piece of evidence herself. That evening, my phone rang. Melissa sounded more serious than I had ever heard her. The internal audit interviews are complete. What did they find? She took a slow breath. The employee who accessed your mortgage file didn't send those documents. Then who did? We traced another login. My heartbeat stopped. Another employee? Yes. And unlike the first one? Melissa paused. This employee had permission to download archived documents. I didn't speak for several seconds. There was a second employee. Yes, Melissa said quietly. We didn't identify the activity during the first audit because it occurred under a different department's credentials. I leaned against my kitchen counter. So someone actually downloaded my mortgage records. Yes. And they had authorization to access archived files. They had authorization to access the archive, Melissa corrected. They did not have authorization to retrieve your documents for this purpose. That distinction mattered. Every word in this investigation mattered. When can you tell me who it was? Soon. Are they connected to Thomas Keegan? We're still verifying that. Her answer was careful, but I had learned to recognize something in Melissa's voice over the past several weeks. She no longer sounded uncertain. She sounded cautious. There was a difference. 2 days later, Jennifer, Melissa, Daniel, and I met once again at Riverstone. This time, the conference room felt less like an investigation and more like the final chapter of one. Melissa placed a thin folder on the table. Our internal review has concluded. She opened it. The second employee admitted downloading your archived mortgage documents. My pulse quickened. They admitted it. Yes. Why? They believed they were responding to a legitimate internal request connected to a commercial loan review. Jennifer frowned. Who requested it? Melissa slid another page across the table. The request originated from Thomas Keegan. So he lied. Yes. He represented himself as needing supporting documentation before closing. Daniel rubbed his forehead. Our procedures required independent verification. Melissa nodded. Unfortunately, it didn't happen. I looked down at the report. The employee had violated policy. Thomas Keegan had misrepresented the request. Emily had supplied my personal identity. Each person had contributed something different. None of them alone could have created the fraud. Together they had. Jennifer summarized it simply. No single failure caused this. It was a chain. Exactly, a chain. One broken safeguard after another. The following week, the bank finalized its position. Riverstone accepted responsibility for failures within its verification process. The bank agreed to permanently remove the fraudulent commercial loan from my credit history. Every negative reporting entry would be deleted. Collection activity would stop immediately. Written confirmation would be provided to every major credit bureau. When Daniel handed me the agreement, I read every page twice. Not because I distrusted him, because after everything that had happened, I no longer signed documents without understanding every sentence. When I finished, Jennifer smiled. That's the June I like. I laughed softly. I don't think I'll ever sign anything casually again. I hope you don't. Emily's situation was different. The bank's agreement with me didn't erase her responsibility. Over the following weeks, negotiations continued between Emily, her attorney, the bank, and the appropriate authorities. Eventually, an agreement was reached. Emily accepted responsibility for using my identity during the loan application. She agreed to cooperate fully with every remaining investigation. She also accepted a court-approved repayment plan tied to the remaining business assets she still owned. Instead of trying to hide money or declare bankruptcy immediately, she would liquidate the company in an orderly process and repay as much as legally possible. When Jennifer explained the agreement to me, she added something important. This isn't about revenge. I know. It's about accountability. I nodded. There's a difference. There always was. What surprised me most wasn't Emily. It was my parents. A week after the settlement terms became public within the family, Mom called. Can we come over? I almost said no. Instead, I agreed. They arrived exactly at 6. Dad looked older than I remembered. Mom held a casserole dish out of habit. I smiled politely. You didn't need to bring dinner. I know. She placed it on the kitchen counter anyway. For several minutes, we talked about ordinary things, the weather, Dad's garden, my job. No one mentioned the investigation. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We owe you an apology. I waited. He looked down at his hands. I should have asked questions. Mom nodded. So should I. I appreciated the honesty, but I had learned something over the past 2 months. An apology answered only one question. Would anything actually change? Dad continued. When Emily said she'd borrowed money, I interrupted gently. She didn't borrow money. He closed his eyes. You're right. She borrowed my identity. Neither of us spoke for a moment. Then Mom quietly admitted something I had suspected since Richard Hale's notebook. The money, She looked ashamed. We accepted it. I know. We believed Emily when she said investors had finally started paying. You never asked where it came from. Dad answered first. We wanted to believe her. Mom wiped away a tear. And we wanted to believe we hadn't failed her. That sentence stayed with me. For the first time, I understood something I hadn't fully seen before. My parents hadn't protected Emily because they thought she was innocent. They had protected the version of themselves that believed they had raised successful daughters. Accepting the truth would have forced them to admit they had ignored warning signs for years. That realization didn't excuse anything, but it explained a great deal. Dad reached into his jacket pocket. We brought something. He placed an envelope on the table. Inside was a cashier's check. $34,218. The exact amount Melissa had identified passing through their account. We sold our RV, Dad said quietly. You don't have to do this. Yes, he answered. We do. Mom looked at me. We can't undo what happened. But we can return money that never should have been ours. I looked at the check for a long time. Finally, I pushed it back across the table. They both looked surprised. I'm not refusing accountability. I spoke calmly. I'm refusing to handle this privately. Dad frowned. What do you mean? The repayment has to go through the legal process. Jennifer had prepared me for this. Every financial transfer connected to the case needed documentation. No informal arrangements. No secret family fixes. No cash. No personal promises. Everything had to be transparent. I slid Jennifer's business card across the table. Call her. She'll tell you where the funds belong. Mom nodded slowly. I understand. I believed she finally did. A few days later, Jennifer called. I wanted you to know something. What? Your parents contacted me. They did. They transferred every dollar through the proper legal channels. I smiled. I'm glad. She hesitated. There's one more thing. What is it? They also signed sworn statements. About what? They admitted they had accepted money from Emily without asking enough questions. That mattered. Not because it punished them, because it completed the factual record. No more half-truths, no more convenient memories, just documented responsibility. That evening, as I finished filing away the latest court papers, my phone buzzed. The sender surprised me. Emily. There was no message, only a scanned image of a handwritten letter. Beneath it, she had typed one sentence. I don't expect forgiveness. I just hope you'll read this before everything is officially over. I didn't open Emily's letter right away. For nearly 2 days, it sat unopened on my dining room table. Not because I was afraid of what it said, because I wanted to make one final decision before reading it, whether she apologized or not, whether she accepted responsibility or not, whether she blamed someone else or not. None of it was going to determine how I moved forward. That decision belonged to me. By then, almost 6 months had passed since Daniel Mercer first placed those 2 signatures in front of me. My credit reports had been corrected. Every fraudulent account had been removed. The business loan no longer appeared under my name. Riverstone had completed its internal reforms. Thomas Keegan's lending license had been revoked, pending the outcome of regulatory proceedings, and the authorities continued handling the legal consequences related to his conduct. Riverstone also terminated the employee who knowingly bypassed document access policies after the internal investigation concluded that the violations were intentional. For the first time in months, I woke up without immediately thinking about evidence. Life slowly became ordinary again, and I realized how extraordinary ordinary life actually is. One Friday afternoon, Jennifer called. I have good news. I think you've already given me plenty, she laughed. One more won't hurt. What is it? The court signed the final civil orders this morning. So your case is officially closed. I looked out the window of my office. Cars crawled through downtown traffic. People crossed the street carrying grocery bags. The city looked exactly the way it had the morning my life changed. Only I wasn't the same woman anymore. Thank you, I said quietly. Jennifer answered just as softly. You did the hard part. No, I just kept collecting evidence. Exactly. She paused. Most people confuse anger with strength. You never did. No. You stayed patient. I wasn't always patient. You were patient when it mattered. After we ended the call, I sat alone for several minutes. Then I realized something. For weeks, every phone call had brought another problem. Another document, another discovery, another interview. Now, there was nothing left to investigate. The silence felt unfamiliar, but it also felt peaceful. That evening, I finally opened Emily's letter. It wasn't long, only 3 handwritten pages. The first sentence surprised me. Dear June, I'm not writing because I want you to forgive me. I'm writing because this is the first time in my life I'm trying not to convince anyone that I'm the victim. I kept reading. Emily admitted something I had never fully understood. Growing up, she had always believed I was the daughter everyone trusted. Teachers trusted me. Neighbors trusted me. Our parents depended on me. Relatives called me whenever they needed help. She wrote that she admired me, but admiration slowly became comparison. Comparison became resentment. Resentment became desperation. Then came fear. When her business started collapsing, she couldn't bear the idea of being the daughter who had failed. She convinced herself she only needed a little more time, a little more money, one more project, one more chance. She wrote that every dishonest decision became easier after the previous one. Not because her conscience disappeared, because she kept promising herself it would be the last. The final page was the hardest to read. You weren't the obstacle to my success. You were the person I believed would survive what I did to you. That was the lie I told myself. I folded the letter carefully. For several minutes I simply sat there, not crying, not angry, just quiet. Jennifer had once told me that explanations weren't the same as excuses. Emily's letter finally showed me the difference. I understood why she had done it. I did not excuse it. Several weeks later, Emily asked if we could meet for coffee, not to discuss the case, not to negotiate, just to talk. I thought about it for a long time. Eventually, I agreed. A public cafe, 1 hour, nothing more. She arrived early. She looked healthier than the last time I'd seen her. Her business had been sold through the court-approved process. She had accepted a full-time position with another design firm. A smaller salary, fewer responsibilities, a fresh start. When I sat down, neither of us knew how to begin. Finally, she smiled awkwardly. I almost didn't come. I know. I'm glad you did. So am I. We talked for almost an hour. Not about court, not about money, not about signatures. We talked about ordinary things. Books, work, Dad's tomatoes, Mom's habit of overfeeding every guest who walked into the house. At one point, Emily looked at me. I know things will never be the same. They won't. I understand. I believe you do. She hesitated. Is there anything I can do? I answered honestly. Keep doing what you're already doing. Taking responsibility. Yes. And respecting my boundaries. She nodded immediately. I will. When we stood to leave, she didn't ask for a hug. She didn't ask whether everything was forgiven. She didn't ask whether we could go back to the way things used to be. For the first time in a long time, she wasn't asking me to carry her discomfort. She simply said, "Thank you for meeting me. Take care of yourself." "You too." Then we walked in opposite directions. It wasn't a dramatic ending, it was a healthy one. A month later, I bought a small fireproof safe for my home office. Inside it, I placed every document connected to the case. The original investigation letters, the forensic signature report, the court orders, Jennifer's business card, Richard Hale's handwritten notes, Emily's letter. I locked the safe. Not because I expected to need those documents again, but because they represented something I never wanted to forget. Evidence protects the truth. Boundaries protect your future. One without the other isn't enough. I still speak with my parents. Not every day, not every week, but enough. They understand that trust isn't restored because time passes. It's rebuilt through consistent actions. Emily and I exchange occasional messages, birthdays, holidays, updates about our lives, nothing financial, nothing involving shared accounts, documents, or responsibilities. Those boundaries aren't punishment. They're wisdom earned at a very high price. If someone had asked me before all of this whether family should always come first, I probably would have answered yes. Today, my answer is different. Healthy families don't ask one person to sacrifice the truth so everyone else can remain comfortable. Real love survives honesty. It doesn't require deception to exist. When I think back to the day Daniel Mercer placed 2 original signatures in front of me, I no longer remember only fear. I remember the moment I stopped assuming trust meant never asking questions. Sometimes asking questions is exactly how you protect the people and yourself from even greater harm. The hardest part of being betrayed by family is not losing money or repairing your credit. It's realizing that someone you loved believed your trust was something they could spend. Healing begins when you stop confusing boundaries with cruelty. Saying no to future access doesn't erase compassion. It simply acknowledges what experience has taught you. If you've ever been pressured to stay silent for the family's sake, remember that honesty and accountability are not acts of revenge. Holding someone responsible for their choices allows everyone involved the opportunity to face reality instead of living inside a comforting lie. Forgiveness, if it comes, is a personal decision. Rebuilding trust is a separate decision, and no one is entitled to it simply because they apologize. I hope this story reminds you that patience, careful observation, documented evidence, and the courage to stand by the truth can accomplish far more than anger ever could. If you've experienced something similar, I'd love to hear your perspective in the comments. Your story may encourage someone else who feels alone. And if you enjoy thoughtful stories about family resilience, justice, and healing, I'd be honored if you subscribed and joined me for the next one. This is a fictional story created for entertainment, education, and reflection.